Hi everyone, this is Julie Bruns. Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. I want you to thrive and be happy, peaceful, and content, no matter where you are on your journey. This podcast shares stories that will show you how it can be done, no matter what your circumstances. You'll be inspired and come away with a new spark of an idea. Never forget, anything is possible. New episodes are released every Wednesday. Subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review. This helps others find our content and get happier sooner. To possibility and beyond. So welcome to this session of the Peace and Possibilities podcast, everyone. My guest today is Kelley Kosow, and I first came across Kelley and her work in I want to say, was it last year or the year before when I was reading a book called The Integrity Advantage. And it was a really cool book. I think I heard, Kelley, I first heard that you were on Maria Menounos' podcast. And that's where I heard about the book. And then I read the book. That's how I came across you. So welcome today. Thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you. And I just remember your energy from that conversation with her. And you were talking a lot about your book and your journey, and I thought, oh, she'd be so cool to talk to. Once I started this podcast, which was several months later, and I thought, the whole point of this podcast is to share stories with people that love what they're doing, and that was one of definitely the takeaways I got after I heard your conversation. She loves what she does. She's really passionate about it, and I want to find out more about how she came to be so passionate about what she's doing and how she found the work she loves so much. So thanks for joining, and let's get started.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So my first question is always about if you knew, because I remember being in high school and then coming across people that knew exactly what they wanted to study. I'm not saying they ended up doing that, but there were always people around me growing up, a handful that just were really determined and knew what they wanted to do. I was never one of those people, so I was always fascinated by that. I always wanted to, I love asking that question because did you know, or were you just never saw yourself as an author, never saw yourself as a coach, or was it really just something that was always in the back of your mind?
No, I don't even think coaching existed at the time. I mean, yeah, there was sports coaching or Olympic coaching or voice coaching, but no, I didn't even know what those things were. I don't think they were even in the zeitgeist when I was growing up or in high school or even in college. So I had no clue. I mean, I was still of the generation, I'm going to be 60, and I was still of the generation where, there were stay-at-home moms, and I had a stay-at-home mom. So I guess I just assumed I would be that. And so I never, even though I was a great overachiever, I never really thought about what was I going to do in my life because the role models all around me were moms, stay-at-home moms. And so no, I didn't see myself. I really didn't have that vision besides maybe living my mother's life. So that didn't involve career, and it certainly didn't involve coaching.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. There's always college and education, but back then, like you said, people were more people were stay-at-home moms. More people were just not going and getting a post high school education. So okay, so what did you pick to study, or how did you find yourself as an author and as a coach?
Well, I started out, which is great so in college, I decided, like my last year of college, I was like, what am I going to do next year? And, I had a boyfriend who was going to New York and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, well, and I was the youngest of three. And I guess I was the most overachiever in the family. And I went, well, my brother didn't become a doctor, which, everyone wants their son the doctor. So maybe I'll become a lawyer because Lord knows I don't like blood. And so I decided last minute, okay, I'm going to apply to law school. So I applied to law school. I ended up, after law school, I had moved back to Miami where my family was for law school, and then got a job after law school and was working. And when I got pregnant, I worked through my first child, but I had my first two children within 11 months because I was that overachiever. And so by the time I was pregnant with my second child, I had actually had a thought, you know what? I don't want to do law for the rest of my life. I really want to go and maybe become a therapist. But I got pregnant with the second one so soon. It was like, well, I won't even fit in the desk to go back to, if I go back to school, to take an exam. So I kind of put that aside, that, kind of notion that I really wanted to help people, kind of put it on the shelf. I had 2 young children and I was a stay-at-home mom. I stopped practicing law after the second one, right, probably before the second one was born. Had 2 children under the age of 1. So, was definitely a full-time mom. And then I had a third daughter. So I had 3 in 3 years. And by the time she was in kindergarten, I realized I couldn't stay home anymore. That, now I had 9 to 3 or whatever that was. And at the time, very honestly, I was in a women's group. And it was called, there was like 11 of us or 10 of us. And first we just started meeting every week. And then we started studying different spiritual things. So each year we'd have a different curriculum and a different teacher. We'd study shaman traditions. We studied Kabbalah. We studied the ancient goddesses. We studied the Course in Miracles. And that group it just became such an important part of my life, because I think as a mom, you start wearing so many hats. I was the wife and I was the caretaker of the family and the house. And then you start getting involved in the community and the kids' schools. And what I had put aside was that time with my girlfriends. And so being in this women's group, I started connecting, and that was like the food for my soul, being with girlfriends, talking about what was going on with your life, but also learning these different forms of transformation. And so at the time, one of my friends and I, who were also in the group, we went for a walk and we were just talking about how we wanted to give every other woman what we had in this group, kind of this safe space to come and just be authentic and to learn and to grow. And so we thought about, why don't we write a book? But my friend's father was an author, and she said, no, I don't want to write a book. It's such a solo experience. So we decided, why don't we create a game for women to bring women together and to have them connect. And we'd also, put in some transformational ideas in the game. And we called the game, because we had been studying the ancient goddesses, Go Goddess. And it was right at the year 2000 when spirituality was just coming into kind of the zeitgeist, and chick chat, getting together with your girlfriends. And so this game was just picked up everywhere. We were in People, we were in Oprah magazine. People were doing parties. InStyle did a whole section on Go Goddess Party, and the game just took off. And so all of a sudden, as a result of all this PR we're getting and all this attention we're getting, we are being invited now to do workshops and to stand in front of people. And back then, people were doing luncheons and workshops. And how great, instead of having this speaker at the front of the stage, now you have women answering questions. And we would do, these interactive workshops where it's one woman learning from the other. But as we're doing these workshops, now people start talking about some very heavy stuff. They're talking about divorce. They're talking about illness. They're talking about abuse. And even though I might have been a great girlfriend, I realized I wasn't trained in holding people in those areas and holding people as they talk about these deep things. And so, maybe it's the whole integrity thing. At the time, life coaching was just coming into vogue. And I said, okay, I can do that. Because that was like a year course back then. I was like, I can do this. And so I asked around what was the best life coaching program. Everyone said the Ford Institute, Debbie Ford. And so I just jumped right in. And so that's really how I got to, and for all your listeners, I wasn't doing it to become a life coach. I didn't think I was doing it in service to something else. And then as time went on, we ended up selling that business, and I also went through my own divorce. And since it was that work, the work of Debbie Ford, that had really gotten me through the divorce. After I sold my business, it was like, okay, what do I want to do now? And I could have, I went and got certified as a family mediator because I knew I wanted to help people, especially women, through transformation. And for me, it was to help lead them over that bridge from fear to faith to freedom, which was the story of my divorce. And so I realized, it's not law. I want to do this work full time and help other people, because this was the work that was so transformational for me and really gave me a whole new perspective on life and a whole new lease on life. And so then I became a full-time coach. And as a result of that, Debbie invited me on staff because I was probably her most successful coach at that time. And so I started training other people to be coaches. And then as Debbie was sick and she, had cancer, and as she was getting sicker and sicker, she would just start throwing me up on stage. And she created a very amazing workshop called the Shadow Process, which she was known for. And I would say is one of the top transformational workshops. And all of a sudden she'd start throwing me up on stage. And I'd be like, hamana. But thank God I had someone who saw in me something I didn't see in myself. And so as time went on, after Debbie passed, she left her institute to be run by myself and another woman. And so we ran it. And then that, then kind of opened up all the other doors. So now, I was doing workshops, training more people, much more out on the face, and that led to the book deal. So I couldn't have, if you had asked that little girl, or even that girl in college, I would have never thought where I grew up that I would be living a life of service or living a life, sharing, helping people transform their lives and break out of their boxes and speak their truth and become their authentic self. I didn't even know what the word authenticity meant. But so I would have never picked that life, and I couldn't have ever chosen something better for me.
It's amazing that you said so much. That's fascinating. I didn't hear, I've heard parts of that before, I think, so with your interviewer and your book I read. But it's so fascinating that I think being in law, just choosing to study that initially would have been, in my head, I think of that as being in service. You probably weren't thinking about that at the time because you're trying to pick a major and to study something, but you're still going after that. But it's crazy to think that you step away from all that stuff that you studied and learned, staying at home, and then just started this group with this women, then realizing that you wanted to give what you were experiencing to other people, and then figuring out a way to do that, and then having that be so successful. It's just a testament to, like you guys said, helping other people that was the only thing that was important to you. And because that was your intent, and not to make money and not to all of these other things that are, ancillary and ego driven, you ended up being successful, of course, because you really were just out to help people and help transform their lives.
Yeah. And still to this day, just like you're doing, so many people, it's what's in your heart. And I had always been one of those head over the heart. So go to law school. Yeah, that sounds like a good thing to do. And, I was living from the shoulds. Yeah, smart girl, go to law school, something you should do, be successful, practice this or that in law. And I was just kind of doing that checklist of life that made my resume look really good, but I wasn't passionate about it. It wasn't a calling.
Yeah. That's the difference right there. There's a calling and
not a calling,
Yeah. And that's so important, because when my kids are, 18 and 23, when we're talking about, I don't just say, pick something to study and then just go study it. We've never talked to them about that. My husband and I, it's always just been, what are you interested in? What could you do? I'm sure you've heard this before. What could you do without being paid? If someone said you have plenty of money, just go every day and go do this, go towards those things, because you're going to want to do them regardless of how much money you're making, but you're going to end up being successful, very successful, doing just those things, because that's where your heart is. That's where your attention is. That's where your focus is. And all of these other good things are going to come because of that. So it's so important, but I think
and there's so many different, there's, back then you would think, especially for a woman, nurse, teacher, lawyer, there were so, at least I tried to pigeonhole myself into one of the acceptable careers. But now it just blows my mind, what's available and how people can turn their passion or something they love into a successful career.
I know, it's fascinating. I looking back, had I known, of course, what I know now, and no one can ever guess the path that they're going to be on. And of course, it's never one straight line. I'm so envious, my husband too, about all of the things that they can study. And when you look at the catalogs of these schools and, careers you could have, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so much more interesting than it was back then because I'm 50, same thing. When I was in school, it's like, do you want to be in sales? Do you want to be a nurse? Do you want to be a teacher? Do you want to be a doctor? And I was the same as you. Well, I'm not going to do anything medical because I can't stand the sight of blood. So that's off the table. And I didn't think I was that smart in science, that kind of thing. So you just start you start eliminating things. You're really not going towards anything great or that you're passionate about. You're just eliminating things.
Absolutely. And I would say to anyone, because even at this stage of my life, because you're always looking for what's the next thing, how am I going to evolve? What do I want to do at this chapter in my life? Be curious. Have fun being curious and trying other things and just, dabbling for a while.
Yes. The curiosity is such an important trait and skill to cultivate and continue with, because it's, like you said, asking questions. Someone else had mentioned that on one of my past podcasts. It's just such a simple way in conversations, in your life, in education, in your work. It's such, being curious and asking questions is such an easy way to help you figure out where you need to be next. I love that.
Absolutely.
So Kelley, along the way, so you had so many different things that you were concentrating on. Being a mom, obviously, which is one of the most important things in the world you can do. Being a lawyer is a hard thing to accomplish as well. All along the way, as you're trying to, and then you start a business with these women, and then you're working with Debbie Ford. All along the way, what do you think were some of the traits that were making you successful and keeping you happy and peaceful because you were enjoying it so much? What are some of the things that stand out to you along that path?
Well, I know, and, you had shared some of the questions with me before. What do you think made you successful? It was that need to succeed. I was that kid. If you look at me, I was that kid where I came out and that's how I got my attention, by achieving. And that was my identity, being the good girl, the girl that got the good grades. So that I would call it my shadow in the work I did, that need to, that's how I got attention. That was my kind of drug of choice, that shadow and me relating to that identity of self, being the quote unquote smart one, the one that works so hard, that really was my drive. For some people, I have so many clients that their impetus for success might have been competing with their brother, or because, that was the way they got attention. So that was definitely me. And then I think my ability, that being that identity of the smart one, I learned how to work hard. And I still, to this day, I can and I make it about the work. When I took over doing the shadow process for Debbie, those were pretty big shoes to have to fill in. Someone who died too young, this body of work, she was known for it. And I just put my head down and made it about the work. And so for me, I think my key for success is the ability to show up, and my willingness to always work hard, to do what it takes to get it done. And those are traits of myself that I do like about myself. I like about it myself, in terms of being a friend, in terms of being a mom, in terms of being a business partner. And so I think that's really, it's just that willingness and that commitment to work hard.
I love that. It's simple advice, but it is true. I don't know any successful or happy person that just is sitting there and had everything handed to them and didn't work for anything. In fact, the people that I know that did have things handed to them are definitely not the happiest people I know.
Right.
Because having that, earning it and working hard and knowing that it's a product of your efforts is so much more rewarding than getting something handed to you. So yeah, it's a
Yeah,
great
and I
lesson.
think that goes along with humility. Always be humble. If you think you've got it, that you can dial it in. And so I never want to take, especially when you're working with people, you never want to take it for granted, because literally they're sharing a part of you, and you have to be 100% present, and you have to prepare. And even though, you think you can dial it in, no. And so I think humility is a great trait.
I totally agree. It's one of the things we're always talking to our boys about too, because it's not, you don't always see it in the media, especially for the younger kids that are, following and on social media a lot. It's like the humility is such an important trait. But I think if there it has to be taught to you. You're either around people that do it, so it's just automatically you see it, so it's role modeled for you, or someone's telling you, "Hey, I can see that you're not this way. Let's tone it down a little bit because here's what's going to be the effect of that." It's not something that's actually taught enough, in my opinion.
Right.
It's so important, yeah. And people can relate to that better too, obviously. And eventually, throughout their lives, initially it might not feel that way, but it's definitely one of those traits. It's easily relatable, and you don't necessarily, when you're younger, see that that's what it is that you relate to, but humility is so key.
Yeah.
So tell me about, this is my final question for you, because you've answered one of the other ones about searching and being curious, and you know some of the really important traits about along the way when they're trying to find some meaningful work. Is there anything that you wish you had learned earlier in your life or your career that you would have applied um,
Uh,
earlier? Or?
yeah, I think that, do I wish again, like I said, listening to my heart over my head. I was always a head, what made sense person, instead of what lit me up inside. And I think, what I've learned and what I keep learning is to let life lead. The universe has lots of amazing opportunities lined up for you. And you might, like my story, I had no clue. And each experience, even being a lawyer, yeah, I learned to listen. And in my business, listening is so important. I learned to be able to speak with confidence. And so every part of your journey, it's part of your unique tapestry. And so when you have faith that the universe is always on your side, it really does make things so much easier, because now you have this partner you can trust. And life does lead. Like I had a friend, and it was so obvious. She happened to get divorced, and then she opened up a makeup store. And it was just like, of course you're opening up a makeup store, because she was always the one with the great makeup and the this, that. And she turned her passion into, her career. And so for me, it was my pain, honestly, that led me to my purpose. And so let the universe lead. And
I
don't be
love that
afraid
book.
to go down different roads and switch it up. At different chapters, there might be something else. And so don't be afraid to let go, because something else will come in.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh. Don't be afraid to let go, let life in. I love those both. Don't be afraid to let go. Um, I was just, so I'll just close up with a quick story. I had a full-time job. I've had a great job for over 20 years in learning and development. And when I say I've earned it, right? I went to college, got my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and I didn't know I wanted to do what I'm doing until just a couple of years ago. And I
I didn't even know that I wanted to own my own business. I thought I'll just go do what I'm doing now for other people, and I'll just find a job that I can squeeze in what I want to do inside it. And I got that a couple of years ago, and I'm like, okay, here I am. I'm squeezing in what I want to do into their definition of it. And it wasn't until a year ago I realized I need to do what I'm doing on my own. I don't want to squeeze what I'm doing into someone else's form or agenda. I want to do it on my own. And I didn't ever want to be a business owner. It was never on my, I'll be an entrepreneur, I'll be a business owner. That was not appealing to me at all. I know, like you, I know how to work hard. I know how to get it done. I know how to put my head down and do what's expected of me. And when it's expected of me, I'm really good at being a good worker. Oh, wait a minute. I can be a good worker on my own for myself. It didn't even dawn on me till a year ago, which is so crazy at 50 years old. But everyone needs to come to that realization on their own. And when they do, though, that's the most exciting part, because now you can go have all that and do all that in the way
and it lights you up, and that lights up every area of your life.
Yes. Well said. That's exactly right. It lights you up and ends up lighting everything else up. But the scariest part is just letting go of, I'm not going to have that security anymore. Like you said, don't be afraid to let go. It was not easy for me to let go, but easier than it was for my husband to say, okay, yeah, just go let go because of something that I believed in so much, but I'm doing it anyways. And I completely agree with you. The universe will guide you and lead you. And I'm not scared, which is it's a crazy feeling, but it's a great feeling too.
Yes, it is a great feeling.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Kelley. You had so many awesome things to say. I was taking notes as you were talking, so I can't wait to summarize what we learned and when we release your podcast so everyone can get to know you and your work a little bit better. What's the best way? Are you doing one-on-one coaching still?
Yes. So
yes.
Kelley at kelleykosow.com. And of course, anyone to read my book, and they can find it on Amazon or IndieBound, but yeah.
Yeah. The Integrity Advantage. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's such a cool book, and the work you are doing and have done. And Debbie Ford, I read her books and work too. So it's awesome what you're doing and helping people to create the lives that they want to have. It's work that's so important. And I wish that everyone could experience what you're sharing like way earlier on, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want people to learn what you and I have learned in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, in their 20s, which is probably something you're doing with your daughters too. It's like getting it out there sooner so they don't have, I'm all for struggle and hard work, but I want people to be doing what lights them up sooner rather than later.
Well, I mean, I think we're all let the next generation stand on our shoulders.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kelley. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I can't wait for everyone to hear and see more about your work.
Thanks for listening. If you love this content, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you found us on. You can get all my social media links in the description below. Help us keep the momentum going so that every person can live their lives happily, doing work they love.